From Creamer Media in Johannesburg, this is the Real Economy Report. Our top stories this week. We take a look at prospects for South Africa's newest deepwater harbour, which began operating in the Eastern Cape last month. Trevor Manuel speaks at the second Africa Water Week. And 48 drivers graduate from the Bombela Operating Company's training program. Without much fanfare, the port of Ngura near Port Elizabeth became operational last month. Terence Creamer spoke to Transnet's acting CEO Chris Wells about the milestone.
On October 4, South Africa took an almost inaudible plunge into a new infrastructure era when the MSC Catania, a container ship, docked at the country's newest harbour. But the port, which has been a controversial development from the start, has come online in the midst of a global recession, which has affected merchandise trade and its immediate prospects. Nevertheless, Wells believes the facility has longer-term potential, especially as a transshipment hub.
And in that regard, we've already had discussions with the government of Angola, and more specifically with the port of Luanda, where there's significant congestion, and are developing an operating model where the ships would dock at the port of Doha, get really good service, and then there would be a short sea service with the small ships to Luanda, and in working with the port and government, those ships would get some form of priority, so there's a predictability in the service, so it suits everybody.
The Angolan experience could also become a model for a few other African ports, and Wells is optimistic that talks, which are also taking place at a governmental level, could lead to a deal soon. That said, hinterland demand into the South African market proper will also be crucial, a reality that has not escaped Wells and his team.
The transshipment on its own typically doesn't work. And at present we have got capacity, rail capacity through to Gauteng for the foreseeable future, but that would need to be expanded. And on top of that, there is that the issue that clearly the distance between Durban and Gauteng is shorter and therefore cheaper. And shippers want us to consider some form of equalization to make Noga an attractive destination.
Minister in the Presidency responsible for the National Planning Commission, Trevor Manuel, has cautioned African leaders that with energy there are alternatives, but with water there is none. Dennis Ndaba compiled this report.
About 350 million people in Africa have no access to clean water and sanitation. Only 26 countries were on track to meet their targeted Millennium Development Goals on water and 6 for sanitation. If we continue at this rate, we will meet the MDG's target for water in 2036 and the sanitation target in 2009. The World Health Organization estimates that there are some 2.6 billion people worldwide who do not have adequate sanitation.
Too often, however, even after the spending on water infrastructure rollout, we see very little financial resources committed to the maintenance of the very infrastructure and water schemes. In the consequence, risks to the utility of schemes, to the water safety, and consequently to health mount, despite significant investments of taxation, borrowings or grant aid sunk into water schemes. One of the biggest challenges facing all of us in the developing world is the rate of unplanned urbanization. It's very clear that the poor will not remain trapped in rural poverty on unproductive and dry land. One of the immediate responsibilities that arises from this is the provision of adequate sanitation. As we prepare chapter and verse of our collective position to be argued at Copenhagen in a few weeks, let us remember that the issues of climate change are real in all of our lives. Let us remind the world that the challenges we face range from deep hunger to national security. Let us also be reminded that whilst there's so much attention paid, and correctly so, to carbon emissions, so much of the focus is on low carbon emitting energy sources. The race there is on to maximize the technology and spread of energy alternatives. With energy, there are alternatives. With water, there is none.
The first group of Gautrain drivers have graduated from the Bombela Operating Company's training program. Irma Fenter was at the depot to see what the training entailed.
Construction of the 25.4 billion rand Gautrain project will be completed in 2 phases. The first phase, running from Sandton to the OR Tambo International Airport, will be wrapped up in 2010, with the remaining links from Johannesburg to Tshwane to be completed in 2011. BOC training manager Laurent Catala, all the way from France, says Phase 1 requires the training of 18 drivers and Phase 2 another 30. The training involves various aspects, including making use of a train simulator.
Okay, so after a few 2-day induction, there is a safety module to learn the rules and safety procedure. And then there is a signaling module to know the signaling system, because it's a new one in South Africa. So there is a course for 10 days for signaling. And then there is what we call the EMU, Electrical Multiple Unit training, and this is 22 days.
So altogether, how long is it?
Altogether is, plus there is some communication, how to use the radio and some traction power. So in fact is 50 days.
Catala says the company is not necessarily looking for experience.
No, in fact, our purpose is to train people without any experience, in fact, without any railway experience. So we will have some tests to recruit them, some mathematical and English tests, and some, let's say, psychometric tests. And then they will have the training, and then they can be a driver.
And now for a sneak preview of this week's Engineering News magazine. In our cover story, we report that a framework is in place to meet the target of rolling out 1 million solar water heaters by 2014. The University of the Witwatersrand is researching whether the maths marks in South Africa's National Senior Certificate can serve as a good indicator of academic ability. And we report that the future of the South African auto catalyst industry hangs in the balance. And in Mining Weekly this week, read our cover story in which government warns that mining companies will face the strong arm of the law should they not comply with mine rehabilitation requirements. We report that the South African and Russian governments are both seeking to promote cooperation in the minerals sector. And read how Randgold Resources is finding gold at $10 an ounce but selling it at $1,000 an ounce. That's Creamer Media's Real Economy Report. Join us again next week for more news and insight into South Africa's real economy.
Engineering news, not just for engineers.